Welcome to English and Chill. Today we're going to be talking about, first of all, common struggles people have with speaking English, and also why I started English and Chill. So let's get into some of the most common struggles. The first struggle I see is that people don't give themselves enough credit for their journey and the time they put in. People get easily discouraged when they're not learning at a certain pace, right? I want you to remember how long it took you to learn your native language, how much you practiced it at school, in real life, and with your friends, how much you listened to different songs, radio, TV, things like that in your native language. And compare that to the time you've spent learning English. If English is your native language, then you might say, well, I've spent so much. But uh, I want to remind you that English is not an easy language. So even if it is your native language or whether it's your foreign language, it's going to take a long, long time to learn. Make sure that you're not getting down on yourself for not learning quickly enough, for not knowing enough. It might be really difficult when this is your life and you're just trying to speak or just trying to express yourself and you feel like you can't. But remember, it's going to take a lot of time. If you want to get to the same level that you are with your native language, if it's not English, then it's going to take equally that amount of time. If your native language is English and you have certain roadblocks that you're trying to get over, think about any of the most challenging things in your life and how difficult those things have been or are to get over, right? Maybe there are other struggles that you have that you can relate to this. And you have to treat yourself with a lot of respect and a lot of dignity in order to make sure that you don't get discouraged and stop learning, right? So that's going to be my number one um, rule here. And I want to just like really express how difficult English can be. So, one thing I wore today was words are hard. This is a sweater from two other YouTubers named Evan and Caitlin. They actually don't have an English speaking component really to their channel. They're just an American couple that makes things. They're maker YouTubers, DIY, and they make things out of many different materials. But the reason why they have merchandise that says words are hard is because they struggle with their English a lot. They forget what word they want to say, don't know how to describe certain situations, stutter until they just kind of give up on trying to say what they need to say. So, even for native English speakers, English is really hard. And that brings me to why I started English and Chill, right? English and Chill is for not just foreign speakers, but native speakers who want to improve their English skills, speaking, reading, writing, listening, but mostly speaking. I had to myself go through a journey to improve my English speaking. I grew up with a speech impediment called a string along, and it's similar to a stutter. A stutter is where you can't start a word and you keep repeating the same syllable over and over. So, like, pizza, stutter. However, a string along is like it sounds. It is more of an elongated sound at the beginning of the word pizza, right? Something like that. So I had to train myself how to speak better and also get a lot of practice with it. So I have had quite a journey getting to where I am to the point where I've been able to teach English as a foreign language. And it's very fulfilling to me to help other students achieve their goals in English. So, whether you're a foreign speaker who is learning English or you're a native speaker and you just don't know what to say in some situations, have some anxiety, maybe have a speech impediment, or some other disability that is difficult for you or makes it difficult to express yourself through speaking. I want to try and help you and give you some strategies to reach these goals and just cope with everyday life speaking English. Okay? So, let's get more into some of the reasons why English is such a difficult language. Number one is that there are constant rules and exceptions, right? So, if you have a rule like the I before E rule, I before E except after C, unless as in way, A as in neighboring way, right? This rule always has an exception, like weird, right? Weird is E before I. There's no C and it doesn't sound like A. So these rules are constantly getting broken. English doesn't have any one rule that I think doesn't get broken in some uses. So you have to understand what the rule is and which ones are exceptions if you're trying to learn through theory. So my suggestion, just don't worry too much about the theory. Like get as much as you need, some sentence order exercises, but really try to learn through practice and usage more than trying to learn the rules and then learning the exceptions to the rules, right? There's irregular verbs, there's irregular forms of verbs that are mostly normal. There's all sorts of strange things in the language, and every rule gets broken somewhere in there. So, yeah, really try to take that into account whenever you learn a new rule in English, because you're going to hear somebody break it, and then you're going to hear, wait a minute, I thought that. So, it might be a little confusing, right? Maybe that person is using the language wrong, or maybe that's an exception to the rule. It's things like this that can be really confusing. Okay. Another thing that you might notice as you're doing these listening or listening to people speak English is that a lot of the words are very muddy. So the way we blend our words together is referred to as the schwa sound. So sometimes there's a distinct space between when we're speaking, at least, between one word and the next word. Sometimes they just blend together. This is because of the schwa sound. And it makes English a very kind of muddy language. It can be a little difficult to tell where one word stops and the next word begins, right? I recommend, like I said, with the usage, don't be afraid to ask people to repeat themselves. This is a really, really normal thing in English. We all have to ask people to repeat themselves multiple. It's not a fault of yours if you have to ask somebody to repeat themselves, right? It's a normal thing whether you are a native speaker or not. Okay. So just know that English can be muddy and don't be afraid to ask if you don't understand what somebody is saying. Another thing I want to point out is the differences in the language, right? We have a lot of countries that speak English and have different cultures. We also have a lot of interesting cultural significance happening within each of those countries that might change the language a little bit. For example, here in America, African Americans might speak a little differently because of their heritage and ancestry than white Americans or Anglo Americans. And these are important differences that are like good culturally. Like they are not something that should be erased necessarily. These are things that define cultures, right? But if you're an English learner or you have trouble with language, these things might be a little difficult, right, to understand. If somebody is speaking in a different accent than you're used to, if somebody is using different words than you know, it can make it confusing. So, uh, again, my advice for this is just to be open to opportunities to listen to different accents You know, some people say, like, oh, I live in America, I'm not going to listen to anything with a British accent. There's a lot of people in America that have British accents. There's a lot of people that immigrate from other countries. There's also a lot of other accents just in America. Like if you listen to somebody from Boston, they're going to sound a lot different than somebody who lives in Texas, right? Uh, so just be open to, learning through many different accents. Then you'll understand a little bit better. And if you hear a certain accent, you might be able to pick up on it. Don't close yourself off to any sort of English. Right. And the last thing that can make English learning really difficult is how much it changes or how often it changes. So, certain generations might start creating new words. They might start using words in a different way or pronouncing them different. There might be a reason, maybe for humor, or just because there's not any other term that really expresses this thing, this idea yet. But the language is constantly changing. People are using words in different ways or adding new words to the language all the time. And it can be hard to keep up with, right? So sometimes you might learn like a newer way of saying things, and then the older way might be a little confusing, or vice versa. So remember that things change a lot. Again, just be open to asking or looking things up for newer slang words. Even native speakers have a hard time keeping up with the language. Like the word baddie, Baddie, now has its own meaning as like a really attractive person, which is something that I've heard native speakers have to describe to each other at a party recently, right? So it's not a it's not an easy language. Just give yourself grace. And for my closing point today, I just want to point out one thing. Uh, Native speakers have a difficult time with English too. So one lesson I really like to teach is based on this Vox journalism piece on YouTube about usage of subtitles for movies. And I've heard so many of my students who are foreign speakers say, oh, I'd really love to watch a movie without subtitles and understand it fully. I can't even watch a movie without subtitles and understand it fully for the most part. It's very difficult. And the Vox video describes that of their audience, who I assume are mostly native speakers, over 56% of them also watch the subtitles all the time with every piece of. So this is not just you, right? It's a difficult language to understand, and they go through a lot of technological changes that have made the video of the language even harder to understand as well. So it's okay to watch with the subtitles. And I actually encourage watching with the subtitles because some people are visual learners, some people are auditory learners. I think most people respond best when it's actually both, right? So when you can see and hear the word at the same time, you're going to learn and memorize that word a lot faster, I think. So don't get down on yourself if you need to turn on the subtitles. Please turn on the subtitles and enjoy the movie and be able to read the full story. That's why I watch the subtitles. All right. So I hope that this made you feel better about your speaking skills. Remember, be open to every opportunity. Listen, listen, listen. And don't get down on yourself for it if it's taking a long time, or if you're struggling, or if it feels harder some days than it does other days. Remember, that's all normal. Just keep yourself open to any opportunity you have to get more immersed in the language, and trust your brain to really do the rest. So that's it for today. If you like this video, please watch one of my others. I have several. Okay, bye bye.